to do a video on the concept of triangulation. And what that means is that, let's say you have a husband and a wife, and they're separated and divorced, and their communication is completely broken down, but they have one or more kids, and they use their kids then as kind of pigeon carriers to relay information back to each other, or even just in some kind of emotional blackmail game, which unfortunately it's something I see so much. It's such a common problem, and it's incredibly destructive for the children. And it's really, if any parent is capable of doing this, it's really a measure of how emotionally detached they are from their own kids, because they're completely oblivious of the emotional damage this is doing. Because, you know, a child is attached to both parents. It needs the two of them. You know, obviously that's dependent on their age. The younger they are, the closer the attachment. And to be in the middle, back and forth between this rouse and to be used in the same way, it will do huge psychological damage inside themselves. But again, the parents, because they're so caught up in their own world and their own problems, that they're oblivious that they're doing this. And they'll regret it later on in life, because it really affects their relationship, and specifically the amount of trust that their child has for their parents growing up later on. Now, why people do it, there's a ton of different reasons. It could be financial reasons. Maybe one person isn't pulling their weight, paying child benefit or whatever else. Maybe the person is using the child as a pawn for emotional blackmail to get them to pay more. In other cases, there could be guilt around a separation, and their way of managing their own guilt is by justifying the decision and alienating them, the child from one or both parents, or one or the other parent rather. Or it could be just fear. Maybe they're fearful that the other parent will alienate their child against them, so they just counter that, or they jump in the middle and get ahead of the other person. Now, a lot of the examples I hear, or so many examples, it's the mother is the person that's using the child, and I think that's incredibly unfair, because I have seen plenty of fathers do the same thing. It's ridiculous, and it's incredibly destructive. And again, I think everybody suffers, because later on in life, you know, you don't forget these experiences. A child may be young, but they know who they can trust, and they'll know when they're being used. And you have to be so careful, because, you know, later on in life it will affect their self-esteem, it will affect how they feel about themselves. But again, they may grow up to resent both parties, and even the parent who did nothing wrong, and he was the one who was being blamed or being alienated against, they probably didn't do anything wrong, but unfortunately they're suffering as well. Now, how do you deal with this? You know, if you're the parent who's on the receiving end of all of this, there's no quick fix to this, and I think it really requires a huge amount of maturity, and I think, you know, and patience as well, but maturity in particular. And I see, when I see couples splitting, and I'm always curious of the dynamic of the relationship with the child and the parent, and often the parent tries to be their buddy, you know, or their pal, and there's nothing wrong with that, but a child doesn't need another buddy. They need a mature parent who is strong and who is calm and is able to separate their own anxieties and their own fears and possibly their own self-esteem away from their relationship with their child. So if the child does start to act out, if they start to believe some of the alienation tactics that are being, to be able to separate, not personalize it, know where all this is coming from, to stay calm and not react so defensively, but just create an environment where they can trust you. And the best way you can develop trust with your child, especially if the separation involved, is do not speak ill of the other parent. And that's been proven many times over. I've heard this so many times now, that the child invariably, or in most cases, will side with the parent who does not speak ill of the other parent, no matter what they've done, no matter what they've said. And the child will instinctively know that they can trust this person because they've no agenda. They're not trying to turn you away from your parent, because both parents are necessary. They're both important. And if to try and create a wedge, a psychological wedge inside a child, is to do all this damage, and they won't know where to turn, but eventually they'll make a decision. And in a lot of cases, this is not always true, and I have seen samples of people, of children reverting back to the mother, even though the mother did all the damage, or the father, or maybe the father did all the damage. There's no rule for this, because you're dealing with human beings. All you can do is your best, but I would encourage you to stay as mature as possible. Understand where this is coming from. Don't blame the kids, because they don't have any choice. They didn't pick their mother or their father. They were put in this situation. But be optimistic as well. But just keep thinking about watering a plant. You know, your relationship with your children is something that's organic, and it's constantly growing. And even though it may not be going great, and it may feel like they're being torn away from you, just keep trying to lay seeds that are healthy seeds. Just try to boost their self-esteem. Don't make it about you. Make it about the kid. boost their self-esteem, encourage them, let them make autonomous decisions. Don't force their hand, and they'll know who to trust in the end, because what will happen is they realise this is where my needs are being met. This is where I'm being heard. This is where I'm being valued, and you'd be surprised the positive impact that might have. It could be years down the road before you see that, but that's your job. You're a parent, and that is your job until the end of your life. You're there to be for your parents. Obviously, as they get older, they should be independent and be able to look after themselves, but especially at these early stages, the first few years after a separation, that co-parenting relationship, how the parents are getting on, it's critical to the development of a child. And if there is no co-parenting relationship, obviously it is one-sided. You'll have to do a lot of work, and it could feel like an uphill struggle, but it's worth it, because they're your kids, and they may appreciate you much longer in life, and they could value more than you even believe, but you have to do the work. So that's it, guys. I'm heading off. Talk to you later. Bye bye.